We have been looking at the Sangam Chankam literature to get some image of the prevailing polity and political organization along with the nature of rulership. We have already said that there were at least 3 levels of rulers. Of course, the most preeminent were the Ventar. The 3 preeminent powers, the Cholas, the Cheras and the Pandyas, usually called the 3 Muvar, and these 3 groups often would appear in the text as Muvendar, the 3 crowned kings. And we have already said that there has been already 138 poems in praise of the 43 Vendars. And we find that the Cholas were in the Kaveri Valley and Kaveri Delta, the Pandyas in Vaigai Valley and Vaigai Delta, and the Cheras in the western part of Tamil Nadu in the area of Karur on the Kaveri river in the western part of Tamil Nadu, and also associated with the coastal regions of Kerala. What is interesting, all the 3 preeminent political powers had at least each of them 2 major centers, one in the interior, the other in the coast. In the case of the Cholas, they had Urayur and in the interior, and Kaveripumpattinam, the very famous port town of the Cholas on the coastal area. Similarly, the Pandyas had their interior center at Madurai, and in the coastal area they had the prominent center of Korkai, and close to it also the well-known archaeological site of Alaganakulam. With the Cheras were associated the city of Karur in the inland, which is in the western part of Tamil Nadu, and then on the Kerala coast the very famous port of Mucheris, celebrated in the Greek and Latin literature as the port of Muziris, and which is now also known from the excavation now being carried out at the city of Pattanam in Kerala. Now, this particular pattern of the 3 most prominent political preeminent political powers, it may not immediately suggest that there was already a well formalized monarchical pattern. We find in a poem by a Chola king poet, that is, who was both a king, a chief and also a poet. In his mouth is put this statement that only weak-minded ruler extracts Puravu or agrarian taxes from the Kuti or his subjects, and this act is condemned. In fact, the poem advocates the ruler should only accept voluntary contributions from his subjects or settlers. That means this is an image of an incipient state formation consisting of a class of producers and a non-producing appropriating class. Naturally, in these poems of political groups, the main theme is war, booty, collection of booty, cattle raids, and then the consumption of the non-regenerative resources by the ruling elites, the families and the bards who were patronized by these ruling groups. Slightly less important than this very preeminent 3 ruling groups are the Velit chiefs. They figure prominently in the Puram poems and appear as chiefs of the hill tribes. Their most important characteristics in the poems are their repeated cattle raids onto the plains. Usually these Velit chiefs held lands independent of the crowned chiefs, that is the Ventar. And we find from the description of the Sangam texts that on a modern map of Tamil Nadu, such Velit chiefs were quite numerous and could be located in the tribal principalities in what is present day the areas of Salem, Dharmapuri, Pudukkottai, Nagarcoil and Kanyakumari within Tamil Nadu. We have already said cattle raid is the integral part of the activities and description of the Velit chiefs. The third group is the Kilar, who appears as a ruling elite, and they are holder or possessor of land in village. The Kilan is a head of agricultural household at village level or Ur, and he is instrumental in the distribution of the produce gained by the collective labor of the clansmen, that is called Kutimakkal. Now this is an interesting point. Here we find that at this level alone, the kin labor is involved in the production process, and the kin members, the clan members receive the share of the produce. In here we do not find even a regular levy system of levy. The employment of kin labor and the absence of non-kin labor in the production process definitely speaks of a relatively simpler socio-political structure. And once we gradually see the evidence of Brahmana settlement, mostly in the fertile river valleys, that is the Marudam region, then the involvement of and more complex process of employment of non-kin labor is becoming apparent. That speaks of a gradual period of change. Now, we have already said that the bardic poems relate mostly, predominantly about the heroic activities of the different ruling groups. Therefore, only glaringly marginal is the view about other social groups. The non-ruling group is very marginalized in this kind of literature. But even there, we find at least some glimpses of different types of social groups. Obviously, there will be present in the literature the bards and minstrels who compose the poems in praise of their heroes. And there are even birds who are war birds, that is the Porunar, who accompany rulers to battlefield with war drums, and they are dressed as warriors. There is another category of Pulayar who are also birds, but they go to the battlefield along with the ruler and they beat a large drum, which actually represents a battle call. On the other hand, there are also learned men who are distinguished from the other two types of birds. We also find wandering professional singers and dancers associated with war and performing their musical acts with various types of instruments at different settlements called mandram. At the same time, we also come across sometimes the pathetic condition of a poor poet who obviously did not enjoy the patronage of the ruling chiefs. And that pathetic condition of that poet is described that he is poor, his mother is very old, his wife is starving and wearing only tattered dress, and he has to also maintain a very large number of children. Beyond these, there are also other groups following different types of profession, and these professional groups are related to the resources of the Tinai. We have already said there are 5 Tinais or ecological zones. Like in the Kurinji area, essentially the activities are growing and guarding of millets, bamboo rice, collecting of honey, skinning of dead animals, hunting wild animals. Clearly here we find very little information about agriculture because Kurinji area does not support agriculture. In the Mullai area, we find pastoral activities and at the most cultivation of some dry grains. in the Marudam tracts, which is the ploughing in the fertile area which is called Menpulam, the river valleys. And in the Neidal area, this is the coastal area where not only we find ports but also various types of fisher folk who are called Paratavar or Valaiyar or Minavar. We also come across the presence of salt makers. Interestingly, the Paratavar, who is associated with fishing, and also the salt maker, both are also found engaged in trade. This is a very interesting scenario, how the salt maker and the fisher folk are connected with exchange related activities. The regular merchant in the form of Banikar figures in the Paddinapalai and Madurai Kanchi, particularly in relation to two major cities, Puhar or Kaveripattinam on the coast, and Madurai, the very famous center of the Cholas in what is located in present Madurai area in Tamil Nadu. Along with that, we find in the markets of these large centers, both coastal and inland, vendors of flowers, fish, salt, cloth, gems and toddy. We find very specifically the reference to merchants dealing in gold, Ponvanikam, as well as also of merchants dealing with a very staple item, an item of daily necessity, that is salt, Uppuvanikam. We also find how salt is exchanged for paddy. This is something of a relatively simpler bartering of system and indicating how different regions were interlocked. At the same time, if we look into the Sangam text description of the celebrated ports of Kaveripattinam or Muziris, then it shows how it attracted seagoing vessels, seafaring merchants, and also there came the Yavanas, mostly referring to the Greco-Roman sailors or merchants from the eastern Mediterranean region. What is appearing in the poems, particularly on long distance seaborne trade in the poems, are well attested to by the excavations in the coastal areas. There are two very important sites. One is Muziris, that is present day Pattanam area in Kerala, which has yielded not only contemporary pottery, also other manufactured items, but also artifacts of definite Mediterranean origin, including Roman pottery, Roman coins, gold coins. And it exactly matches the Sangam text description that the Yavana ships come to the port of Muchiripattanam full of gold, and during the return voyage they take back the most prized commodity from the Malabar area or Kerala coastal area, that is black pepper, which is actually a horticultural product. Now, in this scenario, we also find how the trade becomes a major aspect of economic activities, and the presence of Roman merchants or merchants from the Roman Empire, including the Red Sea area, is writ large in the excavated materials from Muziris and also Kaveripattinam area. There are two other ports on the coastal side, both excavated areas. One is Korkai and the other is Alaganakulam, both in the Vaigai and Tamrapanni delta, where we find how the working of pearl fisheries were carried out, particularly at Korkai. Interestingly, Korkai figures in the Greco-Roman accounts as the port city of Kolki, where best kinds of pearls were available. Now, all this led to the beginning of urbanization in Tamilakam, which is known both from the literature and also borne out by field archaeological evidence. We have already touched upon that, but let me once again reiterate that here, according to Champakalakshmi, urbanization for the first time occurs in the deep south, Tamilakam, but it is largely a result of external stimulus, essentially for the need of acquiring prestige goods, exotic items, often from distance, and is not really a process from within. That's why, according to Champakalakshmi, the urbanization as a social phenomenon in contemporary South India, the days of the Sangam texts, is essentially an experience of external stimulus. Once after 300 AD, the pool of long distance trade in Tamil Nadu gradually fades out. It also leads to the gradual disappearance of these port cities, and then new kinds of cities came after 300 AD. That's a separate story. We are not getting into this. Apart from these socio-economic groups figuring in the Sangam text, we also come across the Brahmanas and the mendicants, who are called Iravalar. In the mendicant group, obviously the reference to the Shramanas, that is the Buddhist and Jaina monks. What is very significant, in the Sangam literature, there is no clear information about the regular operation of the four Varna structure of the society in Tamilakam. Brahmanas are known, but that does not mean the four Varna rigorous social structure was in operation. It is only in the post-Chankam literary scene of the society as revealed in Tolkappiyam, we find the beginning of the rigors of a Varna divided society. Quickly getting into another very important aspect of social life, we should ask, what is the scenario of women in society? Interestingly, about 2,380 poems belonging to the Sangam literature, we find 154 women composers. Once again, let me repeat, these are oral bardic compositions. There are also 102 unknown composers, but experts discern that among these 102 unknown composers of Sangam bardic poems, there are possibly women poetess signatures. What we find in these poems, in the Sangam poems, women appear as regularly laboring in the production process along with their men in different contexts. We find that in the 60% of the agricultural operations are associated with women. We come across women agriculturists, women who were drawing the plow, women acting as agricultural laborers. And we also find that women were engaged in rearing of sheep and also rearing of cattle. Obviously, these relate not to the Marudam, that is riverine fertile area, but to the pasture zone according to the Tinai concept. We find them in the coastal area or Neidal tract, following the profession of salt manufacturing and also fishing. And typically of the women, we often find them engaged in the profession of spinning, which is an important aspect of the textile manufacturing crafts. Women also appear in the Sangam literature as proud and glorified mothers of heroes. The Sangam texts, Sangam poems, often portray very powerfully women's or mothers' emotion about a dead hero. This dead hero in most of the cases were their sons. There is also an image of women and home. And the mood of the women in home varies from being patient, angry, sad, and sulking. Often portrayed the women's mood in the context of their waiting for the return of their triumphant or prodigal lovers and husbands. In one poem, there is a wonderful portrayal. In the Marudam tract, that is the fertile riverine area, a wife waits for the husband's return not from war but from the harlot's arms. There are also images of various types of prostitutes, and illicit and stealthy love is also a regular theme in the Sangam poems. I will briefly touch upon another aspect of life, cultural life, known from the Sangam literature or other associated finds belonging to the period of the Sangam literature. This period of Sangam literature, roughly being from 200 BC to 300 AD, is associated in archaeological contexts with what is called the megalithic burial culture. It is a particular type of funerary rites where the dead bodies were buried, either full skeleton or partial skeletal remains, in massive boulders marking the place of burial. That's why called megalithic, because very large boulders of stone are associated as the marker of the site of burial. In this, we also find various types of grave goods were interred along with the skeletons. The greater the number and variety of the goods interred into the grave of the dead person, it would indicate the more exalted status. And many of the graves could have actually belonged to those of the chiefs of the tribes or oligarchic groups we have been referring to. It obviously speaks of, and in some of these we find even gold beads or beads of semi-precious, precious gems and metals. One such very particular megalithic burial site was Kodumanal in the Coimbatore region, Palghat Coimbatore region of present-day Tamil Nadu. This was originally a megalithic burial site. Later, it transforms into a very active and prosperous manufacturing center. Manufacturing of gems, semi-precious, precious gems, particularly beryl, which is available from the nearby mountainous areas, and also many other potteries. This is how the site of Kodumanal transforms from a burial site into a manufacturing crafts production site. The megalithic burial sites, of course, speak of the belief of the settlers in life after death. Interestingly, the Sangam texts also speak of a number of important deities worshipped by people in the Sangam, people of the Sangam days. And once again, these deities are associated with the different 5 ecological zones or Tinai. We find that the Tinai concept is not merely a literary device to situate the mood of the poem, but it repeatedly refers to the ecozones which have distinct connection to occupation, to political activities, and also to religio-cultural beliefs. That's how we find in the Kurinji Tinai area, Murukan. Interestingly, what is Murukan and Murugan would later emerge as Kartikeya or Skanda. In the Mullai area, the representative deity is Mayon, who would correspond as Vishnu. Similarly, in Marudam area, that is the fertile riverine areas, we find the presiding deity as Ventan. Then in the Neidal tracts, the coastal areas, the presiding deity is Varuna, the god of sea and water. And the Palai area, we find the goddess Koravai. So this is the world of belief systems, which is part and parcel of both of social and cultural life in the Sangam text. And we find how the Tinai concept, the understanding of the 5 ecozones, runs as a common thread, describing the mood of the poem, the activities of political leaders, the chieftains, the activities of occupational groups, and also the beliefs and belief systems of the people of Tamilakam in the 5 centuries that we try to cover here in the light of Sangam texts.